Yes, yes, yes. Oh, you know what that sounds mean? Time for In the Paddock F1, Greeny and the Cheese, on a special In the News special.
In the news!
Oh, we're caffeinated. We're medicated. Good day, sir.
Good day. Love being on a special week off. It is a week off for Formula One, but not a week off for us. Because there is so much to talk about. Greeny and the Cheese in the house, in the Paddock F1. Thanks for joining us once again.
I guess we partied a little too hard in Greentopia, thinking it was only 1 week, but it's actually 2 weeks to check.
Yes, our apologies for anyone listening last week and fooled like us. As I Thursday at like 11 o'clock at night, I threw on to look at P1, and I realized there was no P1, and I was very confused. So here we are. We will have China next week, but for now we are jumping in with a little bit in the news. A bunch of things going on, some signings, some future situations. Something I didn't mention pre-show as we were talking about, the 2025 calendar has arrived as well. Not that we need to get into that just yet. The 24 races on the calendar for next year. But the big story, Carlos Sainz, look like he's about to find a home with Mercedes and making that swap basically with Lewis Hamilton. How do you feel about Carlos Sainz jumping over to Mercedes and making that switch? And do you think that was the best move, or do you think Red Bull missed out on getting a driver to replace potentially Sergio Perez?
Well, it's best move that Merc can make right now since he's the best driver on the driver's market. Verstappen's not going anywhere. So, I mean, he's not signed yet, so Red Bull still could try and sweep in, but, you know, it's you know, as you said, it's a rumor. It's Merc's best choice to go for right now. Unless you want to throw in, you know, the kid, but I think they'd rather throw him into Williams next year instead of throwing him in the big team.
No doubt.
And not have the pressure, and not have that kind of pressure, but, I mean, that's probably the smarter move, too, to put him in Williams and see what he's got first before you throw him in the big show and destroys possibly his whole career at that point. If he bombs, you know, if he struggles or something, and you know they got to change it, then that's pretty much his career. So, I mean, he's supposedly really good, but you know, until he's in the car, you don't know. But I'd say that's their best option. Would be to go after Carlos Sainz. He's the best driver out there, and he's the only driver that's actually won a race in the last handful of, you know, last number of races here, so outside of Max, so
no doubt, man. Carlos Sainz is
why would you not?
Proven winner, and a great turning out to really show so much maturity over the last year or so. The patience he's had with Ferrari and kind of haven't built the car for him, and the upgrades aren't really for him, yet he's taking advantage better than Charles Leclerc has. I see some good things with this move to Mercedes. Looks a little more like Sergio Perez might end up staying at Red Bull the more and more this goes on, and we'll see what the future holds. But things are kind of taking shape now for 2025. Obviously, like you said, it's a rumor. I said it's a rumor. So who the hell knows? Who the hell knows, man? Like you said, Red Bull might turn around and be like, now that there's an offer on the table or the market is somewhat set, Lewis Hamilton's numbers were like wacky. So that's not really going to set the market for 2025. But if Lewis is worth, you know, whatever Ferrari's paying him, what is a guy like Carlos Sainz worth on the open market? And we're going to really see, and we'll see if Red Bull steps up and makes that signing. That would set everything into kind of wacky, silly season all year, because now you have a situation if Carlos decides to go back to Red Bull and Red Bull makes him an offer like the Godfather that he cannot refuse. Godfather Toto coming through and making a ridiculous offer, which they can because they're taking Lewis Hamilton's pay off the books, so they could give a ridiculous. And who else are you going to give it to? Who else is worthy of a $50 million contract right now? That's not signed long term. The only drivers signed long term are Max, Lando, and Charles Leclerc. and they're all
Yeah.
crazy money. So, they could turn around and say, we're going to take Carlos for 4 years, $200 million, and he might end up at Red Bull. And then the real silly season starts, where is Sergio going to go to Mercedes to fill that spot? Is George Russell, what's his situation now with his clear lack of maturity going on to the early season? Is Yuki back on the table? I know you said absolutely not, zero chance, not a snowball's chance in hell, sir. But maybe Yuki's going to slowly come back into the mix here. He's already part of the Red Bull family.
He'd fall apart in that seat. He'd fall apart in that seat under that pressure.
Only time will tell, sir.
Absolutely.
Only time will tell. But it looks like if Carlos goes to Mercedes, Sergio's going to stay at Red Bull. Really makes the most sense. And Danny Ricciardo, as we just mentioned Yuki Tsunoda, we probably got to segue into Danny Ricciardo, who may or may not keep his seat, man. I know we talked about it last time, but I know we didn't mention it pre-show, but Danny Rick, the pressure is on. The pressure is on. How much longer is he going to last in that car? And how well does he have to do in China to keep the pressure off him?
Well, he would like to finish the race. That would probably be one. He's got to either finish, 11th, maybe even in the points, 12th maybe. He's got to be in the mix. He's got to be in the mix for those last, 9th or 10th spot. He's got to be in the mix. He's got to be in the mix the next few races. Absolutely.
Got to crash out that car for sure.
Well, especially since he's apparently getting a new chassis for the Chinese Grand Prix, so he's going to have to really, put up here. Bottom line.
Yeah, and we saw with Danny Ricciardo, and I think the word on the street is really similar to what we see with Logan Sargent. And it's really a lack of confidence right now. How much do you think confidence is playing a role in both Danny and Logan Sargent's potentially not finishing the season in Formula One? Is it confidence or is it something else?
Oh, it'll be confidence because you're not putting in good performances. So of course your confidence is going to, be hit, especially when you're crashing out. That's that ain't helping either. Lose faith in the car that way as well. So that's going to add to your struggles because you don't trust the car you're in. Because your confidence is also low because it's a snowball. And you got to get it, you got to break the snowball and get out of that. Otherwise, you're not going to have a seat, bottom line. Your team's not. And when Logan Sargent's, the team doesn't have faith. So if your team doesn't have faith, you don't have faith in the car, and you have low confidence. It's good. That just, those are the ingredients for disaster. And you being out.
And go to 200 miles an hour with no confidence is definitely not the best solution.
No.
A lot of people have been saying that it's really about Danny Ricciardo's age, but someone who's a decade older, Fernando Alonso, just signed up for another year at Aston Martin. Are you surprised?
I heard it was.
I'm sorry, I apologize. 2 more year, multi-year deal will put him till I think 45 years old. Absolutely incredible. Just about unheard of in modern Formula One at mid-40s. Guys have pushed it, but not to 45, not in a long, long time. Good move by Aston Martin?
Yeah, I mean, where else were they going? To be honest. And Alonso came out and said the other day that why would I go to Mercedes since our car is better than their car, so that doesn't make any sense. So you knew that Mercedes was out of his running, but he might already had this already in the bag and ready to go. So he just came out and said something about it. But it's definitely their best move. I mean, he's out driving the car, putting up performances way better than his teammate. I mean, they're definitely one of the top 5 cars in the grid. Maybe he knows what's going on in the back, behind the scenes on the progressing of the car, and likes that direction and where that's going. So why would he not want to stay? And, depending on how many, zeros were in that check that he got from Lawrence Stroll for the next couple of years, I'm sure that played a little hand into it too, because I'm sure they didn't want to lose that drive. Somebody of that caliber who they're not. Max Verstappen's not coming, so you got to make it. You got to make your choices. So
Max is probably nowhere but Red Bull
that they could hope for. It's the best thing that they could hope for.
Yeah, Max will be nowhere
to get him to stay.
No way Max Verstappen's going to Aston Martin. We talked about it the last episode. No. That was never happening. It made for a good rumor, and it probably was a little bit of mask there for the Fernando Alonso move coming out. Obviously, if Max Verstappen turns around and says, listen, I want to join Aston Martin, that puts Lance Stroll's situation and Lawrence Stroll's situation in a very interesting position, sir. Very interesting position. Yeah. But the other side of the garage there, honestly, just continues to stink. Lance Stroll currently has 9 points to Fernando Alonso's 26. And, of course, as everyone talks about, if Lance Stroll equaled the number of points that Fernando Alonso had last year, they would have been the third best constructor. And if Lance Stroll had half the points of his teammate last year, they would have been the fourth best team on the grid. So just get half. You can't even get half of what he gets. So that's obviously, that situation, and continuing to put out, as we talk about just about every single week, continuing to put a driver like Lance Stroll on the grid to me is absolutely foolish. Yeah, you have to want to be there. You can't half-ass it when you're doing 200 miles an hour, making hairpin turns. It's not conducive to a safety situation. And regardless of what you think of Lance Stroll, nobody wants to see him crash out and get seriously injured or worse. And that's going to happen. These cars are getting faster and faster and faster every single year, as you know. Every single time you turn around, another track record's being taken down, and you got to have the best in the world. And Lance Stroll is not, like Danny Ricciardo, and not to go back to him again, is not a top 20 or 30 driver in the world and should not be in those seats. Excellent driver. Some of the greatest in the planet, but not in the elite. And that's the only people that should be driving in Formula One are the elite of the elite of the elite.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hard to argue with that.
I mean, that's usually what it is. It's usually the best of the best.
It's the best of the best.
Driving Formula One.
And when you don't have the best of the best,
motorsport.
When you don't have the best of the best, it puts them in a dangerous situation. And we've seen it with, Logan Sargent this year and Danny Ricciardo. Not to keep going back to them, but they put everyone in a dangerous situation because they're just a step below the best. And maybe a half a step below, but it's not good enough. And no offense to them, but it's just not good enough. And I think Lance Stroll's falling into that category now. And I'd love to see, for Aston Martin's sake, a top driver in that second seat moving over, because you want to see the best performance out of every vehicle, right? You want to see Aston Martin where they can be. You actually want to see where Fernando Alonso actually is. What if you put someone who is at top of the grid, say you had Carlos Sainz, hypothetically, sign with Aston Martin and become the second, right? And Fernando Alonso and Carlos are equal, right? You'd be like, wow, Fernando really is at his age. But what if Carlos completely just obliterates him, and Aston Martin car is a lot better than we think, and Fernando Alonso isn't as good as we think? He's just competing with a shit driver, to be completely frank. So there's so many variables in that to make the Fernando Alonso situation so odd. But especially at that age, is that car even better than it's even times it's posting? And again, very interesting, as we talked about. What would it look like if Max Verstappen or Carlos Sainz or someone like that was in that other seat, and what kind of times would they get? No offense to Fernando Alonso at all. I mean, he really could be that damn good. But it's just, Lance Stroll sucks, man. He really should, and he's got to get out of the sport. He does. But which leaves us to only one more story, I believe, according to my rundown. I'll let you compose yourself for a moment, sir. Before we talk about Mario Andretti and Andretti Racing and the whole Andretti and Michael and the whole team and the whole crew over there look to be taking baby steps towards Formula One, maybe a little bigger than baby steps. We heard rumors about Alpine. We heard rumors about Stake. We heard rumors about an 11th team on the grid, all in the last couple months. Where is Andretti Racing at the moment? And what is their probability for a 2026 entry into Formula One?
Probably zero at this point. Probably zero. I mean, they're taking the steps that, they're under the impression that they're going to get in somehow because they just opened a new facility. It's at Silverstone. That's going to be their home, UK facility. So they're taking all the background steps, trying to show F1 that they're ready. But, until the teams agree to let them in, which is zero, so zero chance. Maybe 2028. Maybe 28. Maybe by 28.
Could they buy out a team like Alpine or Stake and take over?
Well, they're not taking over Stake because that's already been taken over. That's Audi.
Yes. So
that's not on the Sauber's not on the market.
So
they could come in and they could come in and buy Alpine. Since that seems an absolute mess. I mean, that would probably cost them the billions. So I mean, why don't you just give F1 $1 billion and just have your own facility and your own operation? So I don't know. I mean, they could. But it's going to cost you probably the same amount to buy out a team than just to have your own.
But do you want to get into Formula One? That's the bottom line. Do you want to get into Formula One? And as well as what is the long-term investment? It's very interesting with Formula One now because what does the long-term investment look like? What does a 30-year investment look like?
The thing with that is if they try and, if they bought out Renault or, Alpine, Renault, they'd probably have to sign up for probably some kind of agreement that because Renault wants to stay an engine supplier, even though they only supply their own team at this point because their engine is trash. So they probably want to, have some kind of agreement that they would be the provider, but Andretti already has an agreement to have, GM and Cadillac to be their engine supplier. So that's not really going to work out in that direction until maybe 26. But so I don't know. I think they'd probably just want to come in on their own in 26 with the new regulations, have their own engine supplier, and that'll be that.
Could be. But yeah, listen.
And do you really
for those Andretti fans,
do you really want to take over a team that's in absolute turmoil at this point right now? Because Alpine's on full collapse.
That's when you buy low.
Well, it's probably not going to be as low as you think, which is because of all the other investment that Alpine has taken in from celebrities and such. So, yeah, that price tag's going to be pretty hefty.
It is
definitely going to have a B in there.
Yeah, listen. Any entry into Formula One is gonna have a B in there, and you do bring up a really good point because the value could be diluted from all the minority ownership from celebrities, kind of like how we've seen pro teams around the world kind of get diluted, where it's like, oh, this celebrity owns the team now. Well, they own like 0.75%. Like less than 1% of the team, but they own the team, and we've seen that with Alpine as well. And in the business world, that dilutes the stock a little bit, and on the other side can create just overvalued situation where a team is not worth X, but it's going to have to sell for X because of all the investments that were made, and nobody wants to lose money. And if celebrities who invested tens of millions of dollars start losing money in Formula One, that's not a good way to bring more outside money in. That's not a good investment. If you are new to the sport as far as an investor goes, and you're a UFC fighter or a boxer, or as you've seen many of these guys investing, and they're 25, 28 years old, and they take a $8, $10, $15 million and invest, and turn around in 3 years, and that $15 million investment's worth like $7 or $8 million, you're going to be a little bitter about that, and it's going to, you're going to look in other directions, like maybe Sail GP as the Grand Prix of sailing, as many celebrities are now investing in. But that's a whole other show.
Not this one.
Not this one. Listen, big finish, man. We're back on the track in less than 7 days. We have a race in 8 days. We're in China. Any insight on what's going to happen on the other side of the world in China, man? Shanghai.
No, it's really an unknown. I haven't been there in 4 years. So it's kind of really going to be an unknown. It's going to be a wild weekend with it being a sprint weekend. And you haven't been there. And so teams are only going to get 60 minutes of practice to get their cars figured out before the sprint race. So it's going to be a very interesting weekend.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely ridiculous to be back at a track. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think it sets up well for Red Bull again.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous that we're on a track we haven't been in 4 years, and then putting a sprint race. That's so ridiculous. Like, these guys don't know the track. I understand everyone has their simulators, and everyone will do all that shit to get ready as far as understanding the track. But when you're not on it until you're on it, and to have minimal practice and then right into a sprint race, and then it just, to me, it seems the sprint race, you're going to have some wacky points scored. And some teams that don't traditionally score points are probably going to score some points in the sprint race. Go Haas, and maybe Alpine will finally put something on the board here. Listen, Haas needs those points. I don't care what anyone says about Haas right now as being the sixth best team. They're not. And the only reason they're the sixth best team is because Danny Ricciardo couldn't get his shit together this year so far. So not that I'm saying Liam Lawson's going to be the savior of saviors here coming in, but it's a disaster. So Haas is the best of the worst, and they need to score some points to keep ahead and try to hold down that sixth spot, man. Because I don't think these other teams are going to be complete disasters. Outside of Stake F1, I don't think these other teams are going to continue to be disasters for the season. But join us in 8 days. We'll be back on the 21st of April. The day after the greatest holiday of our calendar year, and we will be back with another episode.
Weed Christmas.
Marijuana Christmas. See if Cheech and Chong come down the chimney and leave you some presents on the bush.
Don't forget
tree.
Gotta leave out them snacks though.
Yes,
don't forget to leave out your
Don't
snacks.
forget to leave out the cookies for Cheech and Chong when they come down the chimney and visit all the nice little adult boys and girls that appreciate the good life. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.